The glass of the starport split like thin ice under a boot heel, spidering outward in 5 bright lines that caught the dawn over the desert world of Lear. Elias Ward had 5 seconds. He counted them, breath by breath, before the safety lattice flooded in to seal the fracture and turn the concourse into a glittering cage. 5 seconds to think, and then she stepped through the shimmering lattice as if it were rain. Her skin held a twilight sheen, opalescent like oil on water, and her eyes were a color that didn't have a word in standard, a seam between green and gold that seemed to focus not on what was, but what could be. She wore a suit that clung close to her body and split at the collar to reveal a crest of silver fibers that moved with her pulse. Around her, the lattice didn't throw shadows. It refracted, bending into petals. "You're Elias Ward," she said in perfectly inflected standard, as though she'd studied his file in a quiet room lit by patient stars. "You keep broken things alive." He snorted, because snorting was easier than admitting that today, broken described the entire orbital up to the diplomatic lounge. "Depends on the thing," he said. "Depends on how much time I'm given." "Then we should begin." She extended a hand, her fingers long and jointed with delicate plates. "Kaerith of the Selnari conquered. I require your human improvisation." He took her hand and felt the faint prickle of her bioelectric field. It reminded him for a heartbeat of holding the hand of a frightened child through a fence at a refugee camp. Courage was sometimes a circuit completed by 2 people. "What's wrong precisely?" he asked, already moving. The lattice door recognized his identification and melted aside. The 2 of them stepped into the arterial corridor that fed the orbital's spinal engineering spine. Kaerith kept stride. "A wave is inbound, quantum shear." The Concord's predictions placed its passage near the 5th moon. It has diverged. Humanity's station sits in its path. Quantum shear? Elias ran his palm across a wall panel, bringing up the station's diagnostic threads. Where there should have been tidy strings of green, there were snarls of red. He felt his stomach do a lazy roll. Not exactly a common weather pattern. We name it a Sunder. Kaerith's crest lowered. In Selnari body language, that suggested seriousness, maybe sorrow. On my world, we shelter beneath 5-rooted trees that hold our cliffs together. But there are no such trees here. Station diagrams unfurled beneath Elias's palm. The orbital's skeleton. 5 primary rings, 5 habitat spokes, 5 redundant reactors. Because some engineer had believed in symmetry like a lucky charm. "We do have 5 of nearly everything," he muttered. "Let's hope the habit of counting will save us." They reached the spine. Below them, through transparent floor panels, the planet stretched like a burnished coin. Above, the core, where the countermass coils hummed, glowed a steady blue. "Humanity's response," Kaerith asked. "Evacuation," he said. "But you can't evacuate an orbital in an hour. Not with children and slow walkers and legacy gear that still thinks a file is something to sharpen." "And so," she said, "we will keep the orbital alive." Elias had learned a rule in the slums of Mars. Keep 5 tools near your hand at all times. Wrench, patcher, blade, light, and luck. He had all 5 now, though luck was more a superstition than a cylinder in his harness. Kaerith required something else, 5 numbers that described a world the human brain was never meant to picture. She guided him into a lab where air smelled faintly of ozone and pepper. "We built a harmonizer," she said, tapping a glass cylinder with filigreed veins inside. "It can tune space-time's flex if you know the phase of the incoming shear." "We do not know that phase." "You came to a species famous for guessing," Elias said. "For surviving," Kaerith corrected softly. "You survive." He touched the harmonizer, felt the hum of potential, like a violin string before the bow. "What do you need me to do?" Kaerith flexed her fingers over a projection, revealing a skyscape of data. 5 peaks, 5 troughs, 5 unknowns. "We have a window." 5 minutes. The Sunder will brush us on the edge. If we match its phase, the station will ride it like a seed on wind. If we mismatch by a hair, splinters, he said. "Symphonies," she said with a small smile, "are what splinter when badly played." He grinned despite everything. We'll play it right." They worked in a rhythm that crossed their species. Kaerith had a mind like a crystal lattice, each thought refracting into the next with elegant inevitability. Elias had a mind like a junkyard, everything thrown together, bent and repurposed, nothing wasted. Where she derived, he approximated. Where she verified, he tried 5 quick and dirty ways, kept the one that stuck, and tossed the other 4 with cheerful profanity. He noticed her watching him. "What?" he asked, elbow deep in a panel, shimming a misaligned actuator with a wedge of his own dog tag. "You do not fear being wrong," Kaerith said. "I do," he said. "I just fear not trying more." She tilted her head. In 5 rooms they retuned 5 coils. In 5 messages, Elias persuaded 5 stubborn captains to redistribute power usage across the rings. In 5 breaths, he told 5 jokes over the live intercom to keep the panic from tipping into stampede. Kaerith fed him numbers like lifelines. 5.17 megahertz offset, she would say, and he'd hum it under his breath until he felt the coil catch. When they reached the final coil, deep in the spine, where gravity thinned into a suggestion, the station's AI chimed with the kind of apologetic tone that meant bad news. "Engineering lead ward," the AI said. "Predictive models indicate harmonizer deployment requires manual calibration at the outer array. Remote routines are non-responsive." "Non-responsive because?" he asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "Micro impacts from debris field 3, the AI said. "Manual calibration is high risk." Kaerith looked at him. "Another word for necessary?" He exhaled. "In the human tongue sometimes." Kaerith's crest rose a fraction, hope or eagerness, or the Selnari equivalent. "Then we go together." "Like hell," Elias said. Because he knew what open space could do to fragile bodies, and because somewhere between the first coil and the 5th, he had decided he very much did not wish the world to go on without this being who looked at the universe as a problem to be tuned. "I go, you stay. If we fry out there, someone has to watch the dials and keep the crowd from spooking." She stepped closer, close enough that he saw a faint ring of freckles, or their Selnari analog, near the hinge of her jaw. "Your human stubbornness is legendary," she said. "Your human teamwork is the reason your legend exists." He hesitated, because there was something in her voice, like the faint sound of a glass singing when you wet your finger and circle the rim. He'd heard that tone in comrades before a breach. Not love, not yet, but the choice to bind your fate to another for the span of 5 breaths or 5 years, however long the work demanded. "All right," he said. "Team." They suited up in a small bay with a bench scarred by years of helmets. The outer array sat along the station's rim, a flower of panels that drank the sun. Beyond it, the black. The harmonizer hummed in Kaerith's gloved grip, its veins casting slender shadows. Elias checked her seals 5 times. Superstition, comfort. She checked his once. Precisely. Trust. When the air hissed out and the door opened to the long curve, Elias felt the old ache in his chest, the one that said, "This is why you left a gravity well in every safe story." The stars were not pinpricks but a cold fire on his skin. "Attach tethers," he said. "Left ring 5 latch. We crawl." They moved. The station's surface was a textured path. Their gloves found purchase, their tethers arced like silver serpents in slow motion. The planet turned beneath them, the deserts flaring and cooling. "Ward," Kaerith said after a minute. "The Sunder." He looked up. It was not visible, not truly, but the stars to port wavered as if seen through heat. "A ripple, a bruise in the night. How long?" he asked. 4 minutes? 55 seconds. "Plenty," he lied, and she let him lie because lies could be kind when they were spoken to keep hands moving. They reached the array. Immediately, he saw the problem. Debris had pebbled the surface, pocking the calibration rails. The actuator arm lay jammed in a 5-degree angle, twitching like a trapped limb. "Right." Elias unclipped a patcher and a wrench. "We need the arm free, rails cleaned, harmonizer seated at nodes A through E." "A through E?" Kaerith echoed. "Humans are lazy about the number 5, he said. We are reverent, she said. Then by all means, revere these bolts. They worked. Elias pried a panel free, set his boot against the brace, pulled until his shoulders burned. Kaerith's hands moved fast and precise, cleaning rails with a folded patch of fiber until they gleamed. The harmonizer vibrated in his palm like a bird. The ripple grew. He could feel it now, a pressure against his teeth, a high tone at the edge of hearing. In his visor, numbers rolled. Kaerith's voice threaded through them, steady and calm. Phase approaching. 5 nodes require synchronized charge. I can do synchronized, he said. I have 2 hands. She laughed, a soft, astonished sound that made his ribcage feel newly occupied. Then I will be your other 3. They placed the harmonizer. Node A, a click and a hum. Node B, a refusal, then acceptance. Node C, the arm stuck again, and Elias swore and used his blade, the point of it a bright spark as it scraped through a burr. 2 minutes, Kaerith said. Phase variance 5.2. Bring it down, he said. Sing to it. She did. He realized she was humming, a low, threading tone that shifted in precise increments. The harmonizer responded as if charmed, veins shivering. Node D, he said. Almost there. A tiny meteor, no bigger than a fingernail, clipped the edge of the panel and ricocheted. It struck Elias's tether and cut it clean. For a second, 1, 2, 3, he was a free thing. The stars moved. The station's curve slid away like a ring falling from a finger. Elias, Kaerith said, and there was something in her voice that belonged to no word he knew. Her hand snapped out. The second tether, hers, flared taut. It yanked her sideways, jolting the harmonizer against her chest, and dragged him back toward the array. The force spun them both. The horizon tumbled, training lived in his bones, and so did sheer human obstinacy. Elias found a joint in the panel and slammed his boot into it, absorbing the spin. Kaerith used the momentum to swing the harmonizer like a pendulum into place. Node D seated. Thank you, he gasped. You would have done the same, she said, breath high. Yeah, he said, but I'm human. We do stupid things for each other. Then perhaps, she said, I am becoming a little human. Hold that thought, he said. Node E. 1 minute, the AI said into their helmets. Phase alignment within tolerance if Node E is engaged within 5 seconds of peak. 5 seconds, Elias repeated. Poetry. They reached for Node E together. Their gloves clacked. The harmonizer resisted, then slid, then caught. Charge, Kaerith said. 5. Her counting was music. 4. He pressed the final latch. 3. Their hands stayed on the device together. 2. He felt her heartbeat through the suit, or imagined it, or picked it up through the lattice of their joined fingertips. 1. The Sunder arrived. For a moment, the universe bent like a reed in water. The stars became lines. The station groaned in a voice that belonged to mountains. The harmonizer sang, a note that existed in his bones and hers and the metal's memory of ore. Elias felt everything sharpen. The rasp of his breath, the push of blood, the counting instinct across species that said we are in this together for 5 more heartbeats. Do not let go. They did not let go. The station didn't shatter. It flexed. It rode the edge of the wave. The 5 rings thrummed in chord, and the 5 spokes thrummed in response. And the 5 reactors poured out power in a rhythm that belonged to hammocks and lullabies, and a child running across a floor to be caught. The Sunder passed. The stars untangled. The station's groan fell to a sigh. Elias realized his cheek was wet and couldn't tell if it was sweat or tears. Status, he said, because words were safer than feeling. Stabilized, the AI said. Minimal damage. Evacuation protocols stood down. Citizen casualty count, 0. Kaerith's crest rose high. We did it, she whispered. He let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. We did it. They stayed anchored a moment longer, palms on the harmonizer, as if afraid that letting go would unmake the miracle. Then, together, they released it. Reminder, the AI added in its scrupulous tone. Harmonizer phase must be stepped down in 5 intervals to prevent stress rebound. Of course it does, Elias said. Nothing's ever simple. Kaerith turned her head so their visors faced, glass to glass, each seeing their own reflection overlain on the other's features. "If it were simple," she said, "we would never have met." Step-down protocols were tedious work. 5 careful adjustments measured against Kaerith's perfect ear and Elias's imperfect knack. By the time they re-entered the station, the concourse was a riot of relieved noise. Kids tumbling, traders reopening stalls, a street musician dragging a battered trumpet from his case. The glass lattice that had sealed the fracture melted back into itself, whole again, shy of 5 jagged scars that would need polishing. The crowd saw the suits and the harmonizer and drew back and then forward and then around. A cheer went up that wasn't about aliens or humans, not really. It was about still being together on a day when that nearly hadn't happened. "Ward!" A captain grabbed his arm, tear tracks bright on weathered cheeks. "If you ever need a ride, I owe you 5. "I'll take them one at a time," Elias said, cheek aching with relief. Kaerith's gaze wandered, taking in the mess and the music. Someone pressed a paper cup of spiced tea into her hand. She sniffed it like a scientist, then sipped with the solemnity of a sacrament. "It is sweet," she said, surprised into a smile. "Welcome to humanity," Elias said. She looked at him then, not with curiosity, not with the measured assessment of a diplomat, but with something warmer and more dangerous. "I did not believe the stories," she said. "The ones that say you will try 5 impossible things before breakfast and succeed at the last because you refuse to accept a universe without that success." "We exaggerate," he said, amused. "It's usually 3 impossible things. 5 on special occasions." "Today felt very special," she said, so quietly he almost missed it. Across the concourse, a child held up a hand at Kaerith, palm out, fingers spread. The Selnari knew the gesture. She'd studied human customs. She pressed her palm back to the child's. 5 against 5. A small ceremony with ancient roots. "You could stay," Elias said before he could be cautious. "I mean, the Concord will want your report, but you could stay a while. We've got 5 moons worth of anomalies to map. I could use someone who understands the music of disaster." "Perhaps," she said. "Perhaps I could stay for 5 days?" She glanced sideways. "Or a little longer." He felt something in his life, a vector change. It was not the thunderclap of epiphany. It was the gentle click of a gear finding its tooth. "We'll start with 5, he said, suddenly shy. Then, see? She echoed, tasting the tension between words. Above them, Lear rolled on, each desert a page, each city a light. The orbital creaked as metals cooled. A trumpet played a cheerful, clumsy tune about survival. Later, when the official reports were filed and the harmonizer signed into shared custody, 5 signatures. Of course, they found a quiet place on a maintenance catwalk and watched the light move over the planet. Kaerith told him about the 5 rooted trees of her home, how they braided underground, gripping each other through storms. Elias told her about a field on Mars where kids drew star maps in dust with 5-pointed sticks because the school had no projector. "You count your world into stories," she said. "You tune yours into songs," he replied. "Together," she said, "we make a kind of math." "Yeah," he said. And for once, he did not reach for a joke to break the moment. "We do." They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that comes after a danger survived, when the body relearns how to be a body and not just a set of responses. He looked at her hands, the same hands that had held him from drifting into an uncaring sky, and felt gratitude fold quietly into something like hope. "Kaerith," he said after a while, "what do your people say at the end of something like this?" She considered. "We say, 5 promises anchor the cliff, to remember, to repair, to share, to listen, to stand." He nodded, slow. "I can work with that. And you?" she asked. He thought of the slums, the junkyards, the stubborn, battered species he belonged to. He thought of how close they had come to losing everything he was looking at now, including the chance to sit beside an alien woman and speak like this. "We say, 'See you tomorrow,'" he said. "And mean it." Her crest rose in that shy way he was beginning to understand. "Then," she said, "see you tomorrow, Elias Ward." "See you tomorrow, Kaerith of the Selnari," he replied. The station rolled. The harmonizer slept. The universe for once agreed to be kind. And somewhere between the fifth moon and the fifth promise, a human and an alien began the math of how two very different lives could be woven into one long, clean, and courageous story.